John Donovan, interviewed May 12th, 2004. Well, I'm not really sure what led me to choose The Wizard of Oz for a production, but I know that I had probably wanted to do it as a small, storyteller or something, but I wasn't really sure of the whole production idea until in 2001 when I was looking for a movie storybook of The Wizard of Oz that I had gotten during its 50th anniversary in '89, and I wanted to record that as a storyteller with Grandma and Grandpa. I had recorded a Snow White storyteller. It was about 8 minutes long. This one would be really a lot longer, but I could not find the book, and then finally I was able to find it, and Grandpa and we did a few tests for the storyteller, and it just was not working. I'm not really sure what it was. It was probably all of us, but it just did not sound good. And so then I was thinking, well, if we don't do this, then maybe we can do a play, because we just recorded the Snow White soundtrack in 2000, and that was really interesting because that was the first. It wasn't the first play that Shell, Jan, and I had done, but it was the first play that we had actually recorded and then done. Usually we just use the Disney storytellers. I remember that I had found my Disney Wizard of Oz read-along, and I wanted to use that as the script for the play. And so Shell recorded the first page, which was the intro, and I did scene 2, which was the Cyclone. And those still exist. The Grandpa and Me recordings do not exist any longer. But looking at the read-along, it just was too short. We had used the Snow White read-along for that play, but the Wizard of Oz read-along was really, really short, and so that wouldn't work. So then I thought, well, I have the storybook, so we used that as the script. So one June day in 2001, Shell, Jan, and I met at Grandma's house, and we recorded the previous track. There was a lot of complication during that recording session because I was about to have my garage sale, and I was going to go see my dad, and it was just really hectic, and so it was a Saturday, and we were just rushing to finish the soundtrack because I wanted to finish it, and the next weekend I was going to have my garage sale. And so we recorded the soundtrack, and I remember I could not do some of the takes because my voice would just not do it. Although it was kind of interesting because before I had left for Dad's, I had re-recorded some Snow White songs, and on the end of Whistle While You Work, I did a really high-pitched tag note for that song, and my voice was able to do that, but yet I just could not do Dorothy's parts. I think it was because I could do the high falsetto but not a low falsetto. And Dorothy's is a very much a rich alto because of Judy Garland's voice. And so Over the Rainbow, I just could not do that song because of the slow tempo and the really low alto part. I just could not do it. And so thankfully on the deluxe edition soundtrack there is one of the Garland takes which is at a faster tempo. And so I used that one for the final production. There are other takes of me trying to do the slower tempo, and it just does not sound good because my voice kept cracking, and I just could not do it. So later, afterwards, I had to redo some of the takes, and I don't think we were really ready for that, for the whole recording thing, because when you listen to it, I mean, we had fun, I guess you could say, but the Snow White one probably I think was a lot funner, although if it wasn't for Shell and Jan changing the lyrics of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and Follow the Yellow Brick Road, I think that probably we wouldn't have had as much fun. I think that the changing of the songs by them really make our plays what they are. It kind of has that risque humor, I guess you could say. The same way with Hi Ho, they changed it to Hey Ho. So I went to go see my dad, and this was the summer of 2001, and I edited the soundtrack there. I put in the music, I put in the sound effects, and I put it all together. And it was really quite interesting because I had recorded the last 2 scenes of the soundtrack, and it's on a cassette tape, and so the one side that's on, it's only 45 minutes long, and so I was just about to the end, and all of a sudden the tape cuts off, and I was like, oh no. And so that's why at the end of the production that it seems like on the ending title, that it seems like, there's like a couple of notes missing. That's because I had to slice off just 1.5 seconds of the final, which is really bad. It's like 1.5 seconds, but I didn't have any more room left on that tape. So that summer, Dad got the CD burner, and so I put the Wizard of Oz soundtrack on a CD, and I was going to sell that when we did the Wizard of Oz play, but ironically, that was not the first compact disc to be sold. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first anniversary soundtrack, and its Storyteller was the first to be released on a compact disc. Snow White seems to start a lot of things. Like, that Snow White was the first movie that I had adapted as my own and worked on as my own. It was the first feature, theatrical production. And it was one of the first, rides, I guess you could say, that I did. It's just, it always starts something. I don't know, that's kind of interesting. So now the Wizard of Oz is ready for production, so I had to make the costumes and the props and all that. With Snow White, to make it kind of like you stepped into the cartoon, I used markers for the props, and on the costuming, I wanted to make it look like it came out of a cartoon. So her dress was just painted. It wasn't like fabric, and that really made it actually look more cartoony. But for Dorothy, I wanted it to look like the actual final film version with the garland dress. And so Dorothy's dress was the first costume to ever be actually sewn together. All the rest of them are just pinned together. But Mom helped me a lot with that, and we cut out all the pieces, we measured it, I helped do stuff, but it's still a t-shirt, but it's pretty good for a t-shirt. And for the Yellow Brick Road, I really did not know what I was going to do with that. I had originally thought that maybe it was going to be just some lighting effect, and just have a spotlight on the floor and we'd follow that. But in the end, I ended up taping poster board together and making a master brick and then tracing it, and because I wanted all the bricks to look the same size, to not look at sloppy. For Toto, we were originally going to use Zach, but when the day came, Grandma told us, you can't let him in, and so we ended up using a plush dog. What's really bad on the premiere of the Wizard of Oz is that I had forgotten the soundtrack, and so I was frantically calling Mom because she was supposed to be coming to the premiere, but Mom, sometimes she just says things, but I was so scared that she would forget it, and I called her right away, and I told her, Mom, please don't forget to bring the soundtrack, because I really need it. And then she's like, well, I don't know what tape it is. And I just told her, well, bring the whole, all my whole entire tapes. And so she brought all of them, and thankfully it was in there. So we couldn't start until it was almost 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And we had told them that we were going to start at 5. And so the audience was getting impatient, and the costumes, there were falling apart at the last minute, and we couldn't get them pinned together, and like during like different intermissions of the scenes, like we'd be like and Shell and I would be in the bathroom, and we'd be like pinning the costumes together, and we'd be like taking like 10 minutes, and the audience would be waiting for us. That was really bad. It was really good though with the Wizard of Oz. Another pioneering thing, I guess you could say, about it was that was the first play to actually use like a lamp and then put on like colored plastic over it to make the scenes light up, because in Snow White we had used a flashlight and that did not have very good lighting, so that was kind of good, you know, that we actually had good lighting so people could see, so they weren't in the dark. And Shell's wig for Auntie M, we wanted to make her look older, so I had this gray wig, and we were like trying to put it together at the last minute, and then we were trying to get on her apron, and of course Grandma, she has like, her apron is like in these hundreds of knots, so here we are trying to untie it just to get it around Shell's waist. Not, you know, I'm not saying that she's like fat or anything, I'm just saying that, well, you know, Grandma, she's very tiny. Anyway, for the flying house in the tornado, I had to make that little house out of poster board. That was really hard because I had to give it a 3D effect, but it would have been even harder making it out of like wood or something, and we had it on a wire and a pole, and we were just like, you know, moving that around on the stage. Well, Jan was, and Glenda's dress, Shell's costume, that took a lot of time, and at the actual premiere we didn't pin it together right because Shell was like, oh, you know, it's never mind, no one cares. And now I look back in the pictures and I'm like, you know, I wish we could have put them together better. For her organza, the top layer of her dress, to make it look like the actual Billy Burke dress, what I had to do was I had to get like fabric glitter and like put it on it, and it's a sheer fabric, so it would just go through. So what I had to do was like put on like foil, like put foil underneath of the fabric and then paint it on there and be looking at one of the stills from the movie, and then to make sure that it looked exactly like it. That was really hard. For the Wicked Witch, basically what her costume was a cape, a hat, and the nose. That nose has been in like almost every single production that we've ever done. I remember Shell had that as the hag, and Jan had it as the witch, and we used it before in other plays. For the Munchkins, I think I probably did want Shell and Jan originally to be the Munchkins. They were the voices of them, but in the actual play, my sisters, Brianna, Nikki, and Gabby, played the Munchkins. They were good, but I was just afraid that, you know, they weren't going to cooperate, but they were actually pretty good, and Gabby was really, really willing to do stuff. That's good, although I've always known that she's the most outgoing. Jan, of course, has to bring her really, you know, out there humor to all of our plays, like I said earlier, and so when Dorothy and the Tin Man are entering the lion's forest, behind one of the trees, Jan was like doing this strip act as the lion. It was so funny. And then later she was like making the witch pick her nose, and like she's looking at her crystal ball and she's picking her nose, and it was just really funny. And then for the witch, like when she's flying over Emerald City, we had to, I didn't know what I was going to do with that, and so that was a lighting effect, and so I just had this little cutout of like a witch on her broomstick, and I had put that in front of the flashlight, and I was like putting that on the ceiling, and because I was holding it, you could see my hand, and I remember Jan was like, the hand, it moves, and that was really funny. I don't know what I would do without those two. I mean, our plays would just be so blah. Well, we wouldn't even have plays because I really depend on them. For the flying monkeys, I had to make the wings, and I wanted to make them look kind of cartoony but kind of real, and so I wasn't gonna go out and like buy all those feathers, like the pretend feathers. That would have been a lot of money. So I just used paper. But the problem is at the premiere that Gabby is flapping her wings. They're like taped to her arm, and so when she's doing it, they're like falling apart. And I'm like, stop. But all in all, it worked out pretty well. The ruby slippers were just one of my socks, and I had used fabric paint to paint them, and they look really good, I have to say. I had done that earlier with Snow White's shoes as well, but, with the ruby slippers, they're like the most famous shoe, I guess, along with the glass slipper. I remember, for Dorothy's wig, Shell was all like, you can't be Dorothy, because one, you have hairy legs, and two, you don't have a wig. And I was like, I have a wig. And she's like, you have a wig. And I showed them the wig, and that wig has really come in handy, because I've used that for like almost every single play as well. But I remember they were just like laughing so hard. And to braid it, because I wanted it to look like Judy Garland's hair, that I had Grandma like braid it at least like 3 times before the production, and she got kind of frustrated with that. But I'm the perfectionist, so I wanted everything to look good. Finally, the premiere was on June 21st, 2003, like 2 years after we had recorded the soundtrack. You know what's interesting is that we had recorded Snow White, the Wizard of Oz, and the Pinocchio soundtracks all before the first play was ever premiered. So that's kind of interesting, because we had been recording all these soundtracks, but yet we hadn't even done any of the plays yet. So this was, the Wizard of Oz was the second play to be released, and here we are, first anniversary. Can't even believe it's already been a year. But well, actually it's been almost 3 years since we've recorded the soundtrack. It's a long time. I just really want to thank everyone that helped me. Grandpa, who like spray painted Shell's Tin Man costume like the day of the premiere, and Mom, who helped me financially, and Dad, who like paid for the CDs and stuff that I made. And I have made a lot of CDs like this one, to release. And especially thanks to Grandma for letting me use her house. And thank you to Shell and Jam, because without you guys there would be no plays. So yeah, I don't know what I would do without you guys. And we have a lot of memories, a lot of performance memories. Thanks to Brianna, Nikki, and Gabby for being in production. And thank you to all of you who have participated in the first anniversary of John Donovan Productions Presents The Wizard of Oz.